when we have like a family event, say we need to meet 7 o'clock, like the meal is booked for 7, they tell me and Will that the meal is booked for 6:30
Oh,
because they
fab.
know if they say 7, we will be late. And and the thing is, we know they do this as well, but it somehow works because we're like, right, well, let's try and get
Hmm.
there for 6:30. And we do end up usually being around the time we're supposed to get there.
That's a really good idea, actually. That's a really good way of doing it.
Yeah. I don't know how it works, like psychologically, because you'd think the fact that we know that actually we need to be there at 7 and they're telling us 6:30 wouldn't make a difference because we'd still know we have to be there at 7, but it somehow
Hmm.
does work
Yeah,
for us.
yeah.
No.
But there's something to be said, like for me in the mornings, about having too much time. Like if I wake up really early, I'm like,
Hmm.
oh, I've got ages before I really need to like start working. And then I'm late because I have too much time.
This is what I do all the time. I think I like overestimate. I think it's overestimate. I think I overestimate how much time I have or underestimate how long it takes to do things.
I still in my head very much believe that it just takes me 10 minutes to drive to the fuel station and fill up and come back home. And it doesn't. It takes me at least 20. But
Yeah.
I only ever
I,
cater for 10 minutes.
so this is why I was late this morning because this is how my brain works, right? It was 20 to 9 and my hair was still wet. And I was like, okay, that's plenty of time. Take me 10 minutes to dry my hair, 3 minutes to boil a kettle and make myself a cuppa. Maybe, might be ambitious. 2 minutes to get dressed, just putting on some clothes. Then that leaves me 5 minutes to get everything set up on my laptop to sit down. I thought that was a sound plan. And actually, it didn't really work that way because it was like 3 minutes to, and I hadn't made my cuppa yet. And I was like, oh, yeah, I need to brush my teeth too. So I ran and brushed my teeth and it ended up being 5 minutes late. But sometimes my brain doesn't remember things I need to do until it's actually the time that I need to go. And then it's like, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to do this. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
shit, I'm late again.
Yeah. Don't worry. I accept you as you are, Becca. Doesn't
Thank
bother
you.
me.
Yeah. Well, there is no segue to what we're talking about today, is there? Or can you think of like a very creative segue into this topic from that?
No, actually, I can't. I'm trying to think if there's a link between the fact that we're talking about like the mornings and getting ready, and if that links in any way to like a Monday morning, but it doesn't.
Ooh, I
But
like that thread.
that's as close as I can get it. Because I mean, what are we talking about today?
Oh, what would be the right way to word it? I guess we're talking about weekends and
Hmm.
how the weekends affects our eating or leads to binge eating. And then that kind of how that bleeds into the following week, like that Monday morning and we carry into the next week. I think
Yeah,
that's what I've been prepping for. So I hope that's what
yeah,
what we're talking about.
that's what I've been thinking about this week. I think there was very rarely a weekend that didn't result in a binge. I think that was once in a blue moon would I ever have a weekend where food went the way that I intended it to be. I don't know about you, what weekends were like for you.
Yeah, I've been reflecting on this to prep for today, and I definitely had a different relationship with food at the weekend, a different behavior around food at the weekend in the past when I had disordered eating, so eating disorder, whichever phase we're looking at. What? How was it for you? So you say that you always binged. I mean, I'm happy to share my experiences as well. But obviously, you said that you didn't have a weekend without binging. How do you look back on that now, or how would you describe that?
Well, when I think about it, there was always the intention to be good with food at the weekend, especially if I had a good week. There were times where the weekend felt like, oh, I've earned some food. I've earned having foods that I wouldn't normally allow myself because I've done really well in the week. So there was times when I experienced it and I just told myself that I was eating because I deserved to eat a certain way. And then there were other times where it was really a case of white knuckling through the weekend, of trying really hard for food to play out the way that it had in the week, which was very restrictive and very limited. But there's something about a weekend when you're not at work, there is unstructured time. It is socializing, it is relaxing, or it is catching up on everything that you didn't do in the week. The weekend is a different feeling altogether. And I could never match my weeks to my weekends, if that makes sense. Like, very rarely was I very good in the week and then also good in the weekend. Yeah, in quotation marks, to the point where I'd kind of dread the weekends a little bit, especially towards the last few years of binge eating, where I was just like, I just know this isn't going to go well.
It's really interesting to hear your perspective, actually, because mine, I think, it's quite different to yours with the weekends. Because I don't think I had that mentality that you had, which was around trying to continue however you'd eaten in the week into the weekend. I think I related much more to what you were saying around I've earned these foods at the weekend. Although actually, I don't think I necessarily worded it that way at the time, but I definitely had a much more permissive mentality around food. And when I was reflecting on this, because my experience of like disordered eating has gone through many different phases, and it morphed into different things along the way. There was kind of two phases which stuck out to me, where my relationship with food at the weekend and my behavior around it was very different to how it is now. One time that particularly stuck out to me was the period of time where I was like in my very heavily restrictive phase. And Monday to Saturday. I was trying to think of what's the word for Sunday. Monday to Saturday, I was very, very restrictive, and I exercised pretty much every day. And my thing was like no carbs or low carbs. So Monday to Saturday, that's pretty much how I ate. Aside from carbohydrates from like fruit and vegetables, there was no like starchy carbs really in my diet. And I also had a lot of structure Monday to Saturday. Like, I worked Monday to Saturday, and I attended like gym classes or activities. I was living abroad at the time, so I attended some form of like activity or social event most of those days. Nearly knocked my microphone over there. Sorry. And it was always the Sunday that got me. It wasn't the whole weekend. It was just the Sunday. And I remember that, actually remember how this behavior developed, like the first time it happened. But I got into like a habit of like every single Sunday would basically be binge on carbs day. And I would do nothing else. Like, I had nothing else planned on a Sunday. And where I lived abroad, most stuff was closed. Most shops and things were closed on a Sunday. So there wasn't much to do. I didn't work on a Sunday. I didn't have any like social events or like there's classes or anything like scheduled in on a Sunday. So it was just this big empty day of no real plans. And the Sunday ended up being, it's like just constant binge on carbs. And I would go to the corner shop, and buy whatever foods it was I was going to binge on, come home, binge on them, rest for a while, go to the shop, buy the same stuff, come home, binge on them, rest for a while, sleep. And I would just literally repeat this for the majority of my waking hours of the Sunday. And I look back on that now, and I can see how there was definitely a biological drive there. If 6 days out of the 7 days of the week, I was not giving my body any of these starchy or complex carbs to eat. And I was exercising as intensely as I was. Like my body needed that fuel. So there was definitely a biological drive there. Maybe that's how it developed. Like maybe that's where it was like born from. Do you know what I mean? But what really sticks out to me about this experience is like how ritualistic it had become on that Sunday. Like it felt like I had to do it on a Sunday. There was how many like if I didn't do it on a Sunday because there was some of the plans that came up, felt really uneasy and really unsettled. And it was like there was something like wrong with that day. And it didn't feel out of control. You know, those binges on that Sunday didn't have this feeling of like, I am completely in a trance kind of state. And I have had binges like that where I'm in a trance and I come out of it and I'm like, I don't even remember doing that. It didn't have that feeling on those Sundays. It had almost like quite an intentional feel about it, like quite a contained, controlled sort of feeling to it. And it was almost like I knew that was going to happen every Sunday. And I wasn't disappointed about it because it was sort of like this weird little ritual that I'd created for myself on a Sunday and I had to do it, you know?
So then come like Sunday evening or maybe even Monday morning when you'd stopped binging,
Hmm.
was it met with the shame and the guilt, or did it feel like, no, this is just what I do and I start again on Monday?
Think more the latter. It felt like the guilt and the shame and all of those feelings tended to come for me more personally when I'd had a binge that was what felt more like a manic binge or a binge that was really, really emotionally driven and it just completely caught me off guard. Whereas this didn't feel like it caught me off guard because it felt like it had become a ritual. So it was almost like, that's what I'm going to do on a Sunday. And then on the Monday, I'm going to go to this. And it felt almost like I had accepted if I'm going to eat this way Monday to Saturday, if I do this on a Sunday, then I can live with that. Like I can live with this system. I know how it works. That's what I do on these days, and that's what I do on this day. And then I can continue that. Whereas it was the binges that would inevitably come in at other times, they were the ones that I found like unsettled me the most because my brain had put them into this box of like, that's when we do this and that's when we do that. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes. I relate to that Sunday being the day where you allow yourself these foods, particularly when I was in the fitness side of things, when it was cheat days.
Mm-hmm.
On that Sunday, you're allowed to eat all of this stuff. That's your time to get it all in. And you've stuck to your regime, counted my macros, I've had my protein, yada, yada, yada. And so this Sunday is when I can have it. It didn't feel like a binge because we were all doing it, so to speak. You know, in that fitness world, it was the norm. And then I found that it became harder and harder to go Monday to Saturday. But when I stepped away from the macros and things like that, I would wake up on a Saturday and you know that feeling that you get where you're like, you just got to keep going, just one more day. Just stick to what you normally do for just one more day. And being in the house really made the weekends feel like there was a lot of white knuckling around food. There was no escape from it. The weekends that I was trying to restrict and stick to my regime were the ones that felt really like I was just white knuckling it to the point where a Sunday binge or binging just became inevitable. But there was always that little soother in the back of my head of like, it's okay because tomorrow's Monday. So you can just start fresh tomorrow and you can make up for it. And then this won't be as bad as you think it will because you can redeem yourself.
Yeah. It's really interesting, isn't it? The word you use, regime. Like that's really
Yeah. That is
like
literally what it was. Like I would eat the same foods at the same times.
Yeah.
That was what I did. And because that ticked the box. I didn't have to think about it. That was what I did. It was
Yeah.
very rigid.
Did you feel like, because you know how you asked me on that Monday morning, did you experience all those feelings of like guilt and shame and distress? Did you feel that as well? Even though for you it sounds like it was kind of controlled as well, like you knew it was going to happen on the Sunday. What were the feelings like for you on that Monday?
When I was in the fitness phase, the Monday just felt like, oh, this is a fresh start. That was a bit
Mm.
easier. But then later on, and more like the last few years before recovery, when the binges were far more frequent and I was finding it harder to restrict, the binges were getting bigger. So I was waking up on a Monday morning still feeling very full
Mhm.
and being very aware that the binges were starting to feel a bit more out of control. So there was definitely shame there. I always felt quite embarrassed about my appetite and how much I was, in fact, eating in one given day. And because I was then finding it harder to kind of get back on track on the Monday, I felt like it was slipping away. Whatever it was that I had, that I thought, if I can just stay like
Mm.
this is fine. It felt like it was really starting to slip away because also I started to notice that I'd wake up on a Monday morning and still want those foods.
Mm.
It stopped feeling like, oh, it's fine, it's Monday, it's back on, I can have the foods that I would normally have. It was feeling harder to do that because that one day, it wasn't enough. It wasn't satisfying my
Yeah.
urges and my cravings for those foods. And I just wanted to keep eating it.
Yeah. That's interesting because I don't know if it feels this way to you, but it seems like for both of us, the feelings of shame and guilt and all those distressing feelings that you can get after a binge tended to come when the binges felt like you hadn't got control over it, rather than I know I'm binging, but it feels like I'm somehow able to contain this binge. I think, hmm,
Yeah.
interesting.
The binges that happen that seem to feel like they take over you, when I was eating like that, it really, really felt like I would never stop eating. It felt like I'm going to hurt myself, like my stomach is going to explode. How am I still eating? And even being so full and still feeling like I need to keep eating, that is such a scary experience because it feels almost like an out of body experience because you just really feel like you're having no say. And so it's really that lack of agency over your body. And when it feels like it's no longer something that you have a say over, then it becomes something that you feel you have to fight against.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's true. Whereas I suppose this Sunday that Sunday kind of binging during this phase of my eating disorder, I'm describing, it didn't feel like something I was battling against. It felt like I was making an agreement with myself of, okay, if we do that on this day, that's how the rest of the week is. I can live with that. Can I make a deal with myself there rather than that battling against myself? Do you feel like those Sunday binges for you were entirely driven by the sort of restriction and then a white knuckling it Monday to Saturday? Or do you feel like there was any other element to those binges as well? Like, was there an emotional element to them at all? Or did it purely feel quite biological for you?
I'm going to talk about it just through that last couple of years before I recovered. I was overtraining in the gym. I was doing way too much and I wasn't eating enough. So I think there was absolutely the biological element, there was the hunger element. Then I would say because my body had changed from me weight training and losing weight, there was this desperate feeling. I don't even know what the word is, but it's this I've got this, I cannot let this go.
Mm.
Desperately trying to keep hold of this body that I only really had access to when I was heavily restricting and overtraining. And so it became this desperate need to fight the binge urges, because every time I binged, it felt like I was losing this body. I think a lot of that white knuckling, the emotional side, was that fear of like losing something that I felt was safe to me, which was this body being a certain way. Because
It's a threat to it.
yeah, exactly, it was. Every binge was taking me further away
Hmm.
from that, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, for me, yeah, there was definitely obviously the biological thing going on there. Like my body needed that food for survival. But I don't think I realized this at the time in the moment, but when I was a bit later down the line in recovery and able to like look back and reflect on the experience, which I think a lot of recovery is. I think you're doing stuff in the moment, but I think you learn a lot more about the process of recovery. Retrospectively, I think you learn a lot. So I think once that phase had passed, I realized that actually those Sunday binges were a lot around my own feelings of like loneliness as well, because I was living in a different country where I didn't really know anyone well. Like I didn't have any strong kind of connections or like really strong friendships there. I didn't speak the language. Like I was trying to learn the language, but I didn't speak it well enough to really like communicate effectively or integrate fully. And although I have had a brilliant time living abroad and like I don't have any regrets about that, there is an element of loneliness when you're living abroad entirely just you and you don't have that community or sense of connection from family or strong friends. And it can feel unsafe as well. You know, it's a new country. You don't necessarily know how the systems work. You don't like, there's been times when I lived abroad where things happened and I needed to try and communicate to the police about things. And it was really difficult. And it's just, it didn't feel as safe. And I think Monday to Saturday, I was able to avoid those feelings because I filled it with work and social activities and gym classes and stuff like that. And then when all of that sort of shut down on the Sunday and I didn't have any of that in place, it would bring up those big feelings of like real loneliness and unsafety that I felt. And I think the binging came in to almost protect myself from those feelings because it just felt too scary to really acknowledge them. So the binging was that safety blanket to keep me from just falling into like existential loneliness and fear and everything.
When you speak of it like that, you can understand it, can't you? You can understand, although we may not necessarily understand why we use food, you can see what it was doing for you.
Yeah, absolutely. You see the purpose it played. And I think that's what's been very helpful for me in recovery is having that kind of curiosity about what role is food playing or what role was food playing. And not from like a judgmental perspective of like, why did I do this? Or, you know, why do I, because it's easy to do that, isn't it? Like, why did I binge? Why did I eat that? Like, that's coming from a place of judgment. Whereas curiosity isn't judgment. It's more like, I wonder what was going on for me there. I wonder why I was doing that. Like, can I ask myself that and explore it? And it's a very different feeling, but that's really helped me because then starting to recognize, oh, this might have been playing a role around trying to help me feel safe from that loneliness I was feeling. Then I can have a bit more compassion and empathy for myself rather than judging myself.
Being able to adopt the curiosity mindset versus the judgment, because even things that I didn't realize were having an impact, like the fact of a weekend being quite unstructured for me, particularly in the afternoon, I didn't really realize that that was something that I was actually having difficulty with until recovery and working with someone and it being highlighted. And with knowing that I can find it difficult to have unstructured time or to transition from going from like quite a scheduled routine week to then having free time. Not only did that help me in recovery, because if I was binging, like trying to implement routine was really helpful for me to feel a bit more grounded again. But I just know that of myself now. And I know that I benefit from, not all the time, obviously, because it feels much more manageable now having free time. But I know that I really benefit from knowing what I'm doing, knowing what my day looks like. And that Monday morning, if I'd binged at the weekend, especially in recovery, I knew that what would help me on a Monday was having some structure to go back to. Not even anything rigid. I mean, I was working, so that did it for me, but even just getting up, having a shower, making my bed, just things to do to help me move again.
Mm.
But I don't think I
Help
would
you
have
get out
been.
of like that mold.
Yes, yeah. But I think if I was looking back on it with judgment, this is ridiculous. Just get on with it. Like, you need to just be okay with this. Why is this such a big deal for you? Then it would be something I would be fighting and I would get myself stuck in a cycle versus recognizing what it is that I need and what can I put in place to help me.
Yeah. I imagine that was quite difficult to put in structure to help you, and finding that balance of structure that helps and structure that's becoming back into that like regime again.
Yeah.
Finding that balance must have been quite hard and a lot of trial and error, I imagine.
Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
Because it's very easy to slip into that black and white thinking that it has to look like this or it has to look like that. But again, even that was such a helpful skill to learn in recovery, in like really seeing things as information and
Mm.
giving myself room to experiment and knowing that some things may work and some things may not work. But that we only actually learn and figure that out by trying these things. We're not expected to get it right straight away.
And that's where we have to try and guess, if you have a perfectionist mentality, work on releasing that mentality too, because recovery is not going to be about having an insight and from that insight putting something in place that worked perfectly straight away and is the solution. It's about accepting that you're going to try something one time. It might work really quite well one week or for a few weeks, and then that might change because your needs are changed, or the reason you're binging is slightly different to previously. So that you need a different approach there. And that can be very hard when you've got into this perfectionistic mindset. Yeah.
It's that compassion, isn't it? Compassion for me is more of this meeting myself where I am in a moment.
The other period of my disordered eating I wanted to share around like weekend binges and things like that was probably when I was less in the heavily restrictive phase. I was still restrictive because I think there was a lot of restriction going on throughout the whole time, but more during the period of time when I would say it's more in like a normalized dieting phase. Like there was restriction there, but it was to the external eye, maybe wouldn't have seemed like too shocking because a lot of people were doing it.
It's
And
what you
during
should be
that
doing.
phase, yes, I remember that during that period, it was like the whole weekend was like I had permission to eat whatever I wanted. And I remember like finishing work like on a Friday, and I would feel like high, like I genuinely would feel high, the excitement of like anything goes now, anything goes this weekend. And that like idea of freedom that I had over the weekend. That's how it felt for me. And it wasn't even just like a mental thing. I could like feel it in my body. It was like, yeah, it was just a high. And it was the like promise of freedom. And that's what I would do. I would kind of eat whatever I wanted in whatever quantities, often in like social situations in a very permissive way that other people might not have not sort of noticed as being like a binge really. But this mentality wasn't just around food as well for me during this period of time. It was like I had this permissive mentality around everything. Like it was like almost like Monday to Friday, I'm going to be this good girl that follows all of these rules and is like polite and respectful and hardworking. And, I think, I'm sure there's like, is it Stephanie Dozier? Do you know who I mean? She has like the Beyond the Food podcast. I'm sure she has a theory around it.
Oh,
It's like a
yes, I
good
know who
girl
you mean.
theory. It was like I played that role I felt I should play as a woman Monday to Friday. And it was all very like nicey nice, good girl. And then it was like the Friday would come in and I'd have this like, yes, this is like, it felt like it was a caged animal being
Mhm.
released at the weekend. And that was very much portrayed in food, but it also extended into other areas of my life, into like, in probably a more reckless way. So it extended into like sex and alcohol and drugs and things like that. And it was like the weekends, I was going to be like, I'm not that good girl. I'm just going to be like, I'm going to just do all the things that I probably should not do by society standards as a woman, as a big FU to that kind of good girl mentality. And I look back at those binge weekends then, and I can see how that was so much about like freedom and autonomy and agency for me. And the turning point in that for me was sort of learning about that good girl mentality and seeing it almost from like a feminist perspective helped me, but also kind of seeing the paradox of it being like, yes, okay, there's these societal expectations put on us as women and diet culture plays a role. All of that is influencing, but ultimately, like I'm the one that makes those rules and decisions for myself Monday to Friday. So when I go wild on a weekend in the name of autonomy, it's a paradox because I have that freedom, autonomy myself to make the decision to change how I am Monday to Friday. And actually, like rebelling like this on a weekend and then going back to being the good girl Monday to Friday is not really having that freedom that I'm saying that I want. I'm focusing my energy in the wrong place. I'm focusing my energy on the weekend and trying to like gain that autonomy there. Whereas actually, if I focus my energy on like the Monday to Friday, how can I be more autonomous and bring more freedom in and more authenticity to who I am in those days? Then I might not feel this like pull and this uncontrollable urge to just be free on a weekend. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I love every part of that.
Thank you. I
I
felt quite empowered
it is
sharing that.
that it is this rebellious thing, isn't it?
Mhm.
I would
Yeah.
say I rebelled against, oddly enough, being someone who really likes structure and rules. I've really rebelled against that because I would find that my weekends, I would want to do nothing. I'd want to just
Mm.
eat for 2 days. And I was like, I don't need to go to the gym. I don't need to see anyone. I don't need to do any of that. I don't want to do any of that. Because we do in the week, it's that Monday to Fridays, we're keeping it all together, aren't we? And then it's the way you talk about it being like a caged animal and you're just let
Yeah.
loose and it's like,
Yeah, it
oh
was like
God.
an exhale. It was like,
Mhm.
I'm going to do whatever the F I want this
Yeah.
weekend.
Yeah.
Even if looking back, I'm like, actually, some of those things are not things I really wanted, but it was just like
Making a point a little
a
bit.
reaction to those like sort of walls I put around myself
Mhm.
during the week. And I think this is again where that perfectionistic piece comes in. It's like, you don't have to be this perfect person or perfect woman that is expected of you in society, you know? Like if on a Wednesday you just been quite busy and you turn up to work and your hair's like greasy, who cares? You don't have to look like you've got it all together, all the time. Or
Mhm.
like that's a little small example, but it's still a small example of part of that piece of trying to be that perfect put together woman all the time.
Yeah.
And I think those learning to like let go of those things is helpful in recovery, because if you can start to be like, do you know what? It's okay if I just shove my hair up in a bun for work today. You've just like loosened those reins a little bit. And the more you do that, then you start to be able to move into areas like food, which is more, there's maybe more emotion behind that.
Mhm. This is messaging. It's ingrained in us, isn't it?
Mhm.
Being a certain way, showing up a certain way, carrying ourselves a certain way, feeling like we're less than for not abiding by that.
Mhm.
And that is why in the week, just the smallest thing out of
Mhm.
place would throw me completely.
Because it didn't fit with like perf- the perfect woman you'd created.
Yeah. And I longed so desperately to be that. I
Mm.
really had this feeling in me that it was like, once I get to this, then I can start living my life. Then I can continue as this version of myself, as this person that carries herself in this way. There is safety in going along with societal expectations. There's also something that makes you feel, what's the word I'm thinking of? It's like on the tip of my tongue. Superior of being the person that's doing all of that, you know?
Yeah.
I used to feel like such a badass getting into the office and being like, yeah, I was at the gym at 5:30 this morning, done my workout, had my protein
Mm.
shake. I'm ticking all my boxes.
Yeah. I get that. It's interesting because I can relate to that feeling, but I also very much relate to the feeling of like trying to be this perfect woman and at the same time feeling like I'm playing an identity here that's not me. Like it
Mhm.
feels fraudulent. It feels incongruent. It's not actually me, but that is the character I'm playing. And then at the weekend, I'm playing this wild character that feels a bit more like me, but it's not really fully me either, because it's actually just a knee jerk reaction to the other identity I'm playing. And then you get into this whole identity crisis of like, who, who am I then? And I'm aware that that's probably verging into a whole other topic and a whole other episode that we can probably do around identity. But I think that is a part of what was going on for me.
Yeah, because I didn't realize at the time that what I was striving for, what I was maintaining in this perfect lifestyle, it meant that the way I felt about myself was conditional. So one minor slip up and it would all just crumble to the floor. It would all be taken away from me. And that in recovery, that was what you were talking about earlier. This like, screw that. I don't want to feel like that. Why should I have to live like that?
I really like strongly believe that like recovery and rejecting diet culture is a huge feminist act. I really, really do. Like, and to someone that's not lived in that bubble and felt those pressures, it might seem like just food. Like,
Mm,
how can it feel that radical? But it really does. It really feels like you're making a conscious choice to be more authentic as a woman and to reject pressures and put on you. And it does feel like it feels wild. It feels very
yeah.
empowering, very scary. But I do see it as an act of feminism.
Well, it is because how much of my life, pretty much, well over 15 years of my life, all I thought about on a day to day basis was food and my body. And it kept me small.
Mhm.
It kept me not living to my potential. It kept me in my own little bubble. And I never had the confidence or the courage Well, no, that actually sounds a bit. No, I don't like that because I don't think that's quite fair. But so long as I am focused on, I need to look a certain way before I can exist in the world, it keeps me small.
Mm.
It keeps me in a watered down version of myself. Keeps me quiet.
Yeah.
And we're against that, even though I feel like we've gone off on a tangent.
I feel like we have. We'll come back to that another day. We'll do a whole episode on identity, feminism, whatever.
And Becca will get really riled up, I can tell already. I'm excited for that
Yeah.
episode.
Can feel it.
I can feel it. You should hear some of the voice notes she leaves me, guys. They're great.
I know, yeah. I know. There's much more swearing in my voice notes to Katie.
Love it.
No, this is because this week I've sent Katie a couple of angry voice notes about a gym instructor at the gym I go to because he treats women very differently to the way he treats men in the gym. And it angers me. Like the other day, he just walked past me in the gym and was like, "What's your head on that barbell?" And my head was nowhere near a barbell. And I thought, why? Why are you telling me to watch my head on that barbell? Because would you have just walked into the gym area and said that to a random man that was near a barbell, but not under it? No, you
Never.
wouldn't.
I'd have been like, you watch out for this barbell.
I know.
I'll hit you with this barbell.
And he did it to two girls, like teenagers, the other day. Came in and was like, "Are you having a nice tea party in the gym?" I just thought, screw you! Stop talking to women like that in the gym and let them just do their thing. Like you would not comment on a guy like that in the gym, so don't do it to a woman. There's more things he said.
You're
anyway.
gonna snap, Becca. I can feel it brewing, and I'll look forward to that voice note.
I will reel it in. In fact, no, I probably won't. If you like my feminist rants, just let me know and I can unleash them even more.
Do it. Do it.
Anything else you want to add on this topic? Or does that feel like a good place to refill?
I think we're good. I feel like I'm going to walk away from this conversation and think of like 8 different things that I could have said. I think we've touched on some topics that we can expand on in other episodes.
Yeah, for sure. And I think obviously the focus of this episode is being more sharing our experiences of the weekend and maybe understanding why we might binge at the weekend. I think there's something to be said about the way you eat naturally going to change a little bit at the weekend because there tends to be less structured time, more social events. And part of recovery is learning to accept that to some extent as well. And for me, looking at the reasons behind why we're eating in a certain way the weekend is particularly helpful. Like, am I eating this way because I'm having a good time and it's a social event? Or am I eating this way because I feel like I can't cope with the weekends and the loneliness that I feel during that time? It's a very different experience based on the reasons behind why we're eating. So I think that's a really helpful thing to get curious about when we look at binging or general overeating at the weekend.
That's such a good place to end it. And you just reminded me of something else that I wanted to talk about. I didn't talk about it, but it's fine.
Oh,
It
do you
will.
want to say it?
The way that you said that was like, are you okay?
No, it was like, I know that feeling when you like finish an episode and you're like, hey, there was something else that would have been really good there.
All I was going to just say, which we'll probably touch on a different time, but my weeks had to be really structured around work. I literally ate the same things every day. So there was something about the weekend and having all this food available and being able to cook what I wanted and not have to pre-plan and eat like meal prep foods that I found really challenging as well. There we go.
Well, obviously we have a lot to say on this topic.
We have a lot
So maybe there's going to be a part 2 later down.
Yeah. But thanks for listening. And as always, appreciate your feedback and your thoughts and see you next week. No, you won't. Week after.
See you in 2 weeks. And if you want to share your experiences, we are always all ears, aren't we?
Absolutely. I haven't said that in a long time, have I? Do you remember the beginning? I was like, I say absolutely far too much. And now I don't say it enough.
And then you also thought you said interesting too much as well. But I think I do that now.
I said that today. I think I said it twice.
Well, it is interesting. So
it is. You are interesting, Becca. That is your problem, not mine. Thanks, guys.
Let us know if you thought we were interesting, guys.